Welcome to the Live Fully with Kratom podcast. I'm ETHA co-founder Alexander, and with me is Head of Customer Service Amanda.
Good morning.
Good morning. We also have Nicole, our producer.
Hello.
So today we are going to talk about the American Kratom Association.
Yes.
And a program they have, the American Kratom Association Advocacy Hall of Fame. Let's get started.
But most importantly, you're not even an honorable mention because you got, what we forgot? We forgot to bring your award to show them, but a couple episodes ago, you did show them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Your journey to...
The American Kratom Association was nice enough to add me to their Advocacy Hall of Fame. And so this is they put this program in place to recognize all the great advocates that have really done a great job telling their story, going to legislators, going to town hall meetings, going to public forums, and just telling their story about why Kratom changed their life. And so, it's a great way for people to be recognized all that hard work. Because, it's amazing how much work and dedication a lot of people have put into keeping Kratom legal, keeping the actual stories, the real stories in science, getting awareness to it. Because it's so easy for kind of information on the negative side to come out and get more awareness to it when most people that use Kratom it really helps them in day-to-day life. So it's really, really fortunate that so many people are passionate about telling their story.
And just the evolution of the industry in general. Since we started, it's been so cool to just see how much more vocal people are.
Yes.
How more open people are to at least trying it out. And I think it has to do with a lot of the work that the American Kratom Association is doing. And
it's the only reason that Kratom is still legal is because of the American Kratom Association. And it's the only reason I know about it. And Kratom's been a miracle for my back pain. And so I'm very fortunate that people were willing to both... I think some of the original founder, Susan Ash, along with Sebastian Guthrie, and there's many other vendors. Sebastian Guthrie was one of the main supporters. And so he is definitely in the Legacy Hall of Fame because of his work in Kratom.
Oh, I knew about Susan Ash. I remember meeting her briefly, but I remember that, but I didn't know Sebastian. I was going to say Gunther. He was part of it. So today's episode is more kind of like an interview, more about learning about your journey to how you are being recognized for your advocacy with Kratom. And I'm just going to ask you a couple questions and then just go from there. And I'm sure we're going to get off topic a little bit, always.
Off topic? Always.
So obviously we started this business literally off a podcast, and now we're doing our own podcast. I was talking to a customer about that the other day, which I thought was funny. I know you guys have heard the story millions of times. You heard about it in Joe Rogan. You guys started doing it. We built this business. Yeah,
so in 2016, Victor, he was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and this was early on. And this is when podcasts were really, not necessarily starting off, but they weren't super popular. And especially Joe Rogan's podcast at the time was very... fighter-centric, UFC-based, and that's why Victor listened to it, was because Victor did a lot of mixed martial arts in college. He was a coach. He actually had some injuries from doing MMA. He was listening to Rogan because of that kind of connection into that, passion that he had. And Chris Bell came on to Joe Rogan's podcast because in 2016, the FDA was trying to do an emergency scheduling of Kratom, claiming that Kratom had no medicinal value, people were abusing it, it was causing all this harm, and they need to immediately make it Schedule I and make it illegal, ban it. Otherwise, there's going to be all this horrific kind of public health concerns.
For those who may not know, what does Schedule mean, or why was it such a big deal to be labeled as Scheduled I?
So the Scheduling Act is what the DEA uses to schedule substances, meaning that they can put it into a different classification of how restricted it is. And restricted meaning can't sell it, can't research it, can't...
Oh, not even research it?
Well, so Schedule I is the most restrictive, meaning that theoretically there's no medicinal value, there's no benefit. It should just be banned 100%, which... There's probably almost nothing that falls in that category in some ways. But then there's like Schedule 2 and Schedule 3, which other drugs, like narcotic drugs, fit into that category, that they have some medicinal...
They were saying it was dangerous than narcotics?
What's that?
They were saying it was more dangerous than narcotics?
Well, there are certain narcotics that fit into the Schedule 1 category, like fentanyl. But then at the same time, it's like those also have legitimate medicinal value. So there's kind of restrictions on it of who can produce it, who can sell it, how it's distributed. There's just basically different guidelines of that type of manufacturing and regulation selling, so to speak. Okay. So yes, they were saying that Kratom should be a Schedule 1 substance, that there's no medicinal value, very likely to cause a lot of public harm, and so it should be completely restricted. So no manufacturing, no selling, no researching, no ways to kind of interact with the substance.
Learn more about it, pretty much. Oh, interesting. And you know how I know Joe Rogan? Fear Factor. I don't know if you remember that show.
Yeah, a lot of people, yeah.
A lot. Well, it's like the age difference too with Victor, but he was really into the MMA stuff. So when he told us that you guys, he listened to a podcast and then you guys wanted to do a business off of it, I was like, well, what does that guy in the Fear Factor have to do with this? And then me and Brett did the research because he said, research it first and see how you feel, because it is controversial, air quote. Because at the time there wasn't a lot of information, there was a lot of clickbait. So we researched, and I remember saying, what the heck are we getting into? Because there was a lot of clickbait, there was a lot of scary stuff, and a lot of the times when we are not educated properly about anything, not just Kratom in general, if we don't know enough information, of course, anything we read firsthand without really looking at the back end, we're going to be scared of.
Yeah, fear, uncertainty, and doubt is kind of that. I mean, I think it's because of just the evolutionary path that we went on. It was more likely for humans to survive if we kind of stayed more in that fear path, right? So like if there was a chance that there could be, say, a tiger or something dangerous out there, it was much better to be fearful of it and restrict and stay away from it than it was to try to maybe take a chance and kind of promote on that. So yeah, we're definitely very, our brain kind of, I mean, they kind of talk about this where like our reptilian brain, like the very basic area that controls that fear response, is very activated and kind of takes over control. So, you can kind of be in this state of learning or exploring, but if something you hear like a little like sound or a twig, something snap, there's some of those things that just cut right through all the consciousness, and it's like, okay, that's all I focus on. So I mean, there's probably good reason from an evolutionary standpoint.
Is it like a flight or flight kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's where that comes from.
So that's how we started this business. Basically, that's a little context of how we got here. How did you get from developing this business to then be saying, you know what, I'm gonna start becoming an advocate? Or do you remember how you discovered the American Kratom Association? Well,
I mean, we heard about it because, I mean, I'm sure Chris Bell mentioned the American Kratom Association. I mean, they were responsible at the time for promoting information about Kratom. I mean, they were getting researchers together, they were telling stories, they were promoting and disseminating the actual clinical research that was out there, not just based on this, misinformation or kind of older information that wasn't really true. So we heard about American Kratom Association at the very start from this first podcast, and that kind of became one of our, outlets for information of where we'd go to stay up with the most recent research and stay up with the most current legislation. And so because we heard about Kratom because of the American Kratom Association, and when we tried Kratom ourselves, found that it was amazing for our own personal injuries, it just was something by that very nature of, well, Kratom was an amazing benefit to my personal life. So I wanted to share it with other people, saying like, hey, this was amazing. This helped my back pain like nothing else. And I've had horrible pain.
Not trying to gatekeep it or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, hey. And so we just became part of the American Kratom Association when we were just consumers. Even before we started ETHA, I became a member, really? Kind of started donating because I wanted, I mean, like anything in this world, you kind of support with dollars in some ways, right? Like I can, if I really like a product's a company's product, I can pay for that product, and then that by definition they have money to do more products or keep promoting it. So
keep the cycle going.
So I became an early donor, kind of giving, I don't know, a little bit that I could. Like, so I think I still give every month. I just have like a reoccurring amount that I give to help them be able to stay like current with some of the bans that are coming up, some of that misinformation. So they're always out there fighting that misinformation, trying to educate legislators, getting other people to participate, tell their stories.
Really good
it's
job.
Absolutely amazing.
And we'll touch base a little bit later before we get distracted. When we went to a summit in San Diego that they had not too long ago, like earlier mid last year, I was really impressed on how much time and effort they put. I mean, this is all repetitive information for us because we talk about it all the time. But I wasn't aware that a lot of vendors at this moment don't have as much knowledge as we do. And a lot of it, I don't know if it's just kind of like you guys just love to dive into it, and so it comes naturally to you. So there were some businesses that were barely starting, and they were very curious, like, how does this work? How does that work? How do you read lab tests? How do you find the difference? And I don't know why, just because we talk about it every day, I felt like it was common knowledge, and it really wasn't. And the American Kratom Association did a really good job of breaking that down.
Yes.
And I was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and we were also very early on helping the American Kratom Association establish their GMP program, just helping kind of, because we came from, like, that was the other thing that we found was that, you know, most of the people in the Kratom industry came into that industry from all kind of walks of life.
Yeah.
We were probably more of the few or only people that came into the Kratom industry more from like corporate America. So having kind of more of these process standards, just kind of routine business type approach. So we were able to bring in a lot of our understanding of regulations, both kind of, well, because what's interesting about regulations and company culture in general is that if you look at other industries, like I first started working for Whirlpool Corporation when I was in college. So I'm an engineer, and I did this co-op program where I'd go every other semester
the
between.
Right, or something?
Yeah. So they make refrigerators, ice makers, they make all sorts of appliances. And there is that industry is very well regulated because it's an older industry. There's also a lot of complexities to refrigerators where, you know, when technologies first kind of come out, there's a lot of innovation. There's also concerns. I mean, you can imagine appliances 100 years ago had some problems. First devices plugged in electricity, there's kind of issues. So,
you know, it's funny you say that because a lot of the times, right, or at least in this moment, we were looking for wash and dryer because my brother and sister got their house now. And they're excited and they're getting a wash and dryer. And they were saying that the new ones feel they've gotten some questions and something like that, or like reviews that the new washers suck, basically.
Are these like dishwashers or laundry washers?
Laundry washers. Because they were saying that they were being recommended like the old school washer, the white one with a little thing in the middle, because those actually clean really well versus the new industrial ones that just go in a circle but doesn't really like wash. Well, that's what they were saying.
Okay. Are you talking about the top loaders or the front
top
loaders?
Oh,
okay. Yeah,
but even now,
I don't like top loaders.
But even top loaders now, they don't have. I just feel like they just go in like a ball in a circle, and you don't really get like
they're
tumbling
probably
or anything.
they're probably lower cost. I mean, that's always it's interesting. There's a lot of product obsolescence that's built into things now, and it seems like, I don't know. I mean, there is always, not always, but you know, my parents would always talk about, oh, you know, back in the day, these cars were made stronger, heavier, and there is definitely some truth to that. And yeah, I mean, I was an engineer and got to build some of these products and design them. And yeah, in some ways, there definitely are lower cost options now that maybe don't last as long. Yeah, and I have found that they definitely don't last, you know, they don't last 15, 20 years, some of like the refrigerators that they used to.
Well, also too, like upkeep on our end too, because before my dad's accident, we had a top loader, but then he couldn't reach his clothes, so then we switched to a front loader. And I feel, excuse me, now that with the front loader, our clothes are way, way, way better than what it was.
Yeah, I mean, front loaders, so washing machines, front loaders are night and day difference between top loaders. They clean much better. They use much less water and energy. They use less soap, and they're better on the clothes. So yeah, I mean, front loader washing machines.
Your experience?
100%. Yeah, I did also used to work for the company that designed them, and so yes.
I'm gonna tell them when they start shopping for it. Okay, so you have your experience with all the procedures and all that, and then you implemented it back into
right. And so part of the thing too that I learned at Whirlpool was that there were regulations that the company needed to follow for various safety concerns. But then due to Whirlpool wanting to protect their brand, they would also have another set of guidelines that they would make sure to kind of surpass these, industry regulated side. So the regulations are kind of like the bare minimum necessity. Mm-hmm. And then based on the company will want to maybe make it better, get a brand value, retain their customers. So that was also something that, we incorporated into ETHA was that, okay, how do we, these are the bare minimum regulations of GMP guidelines. Well, yeah, that we can technically meet those guidelines, but we really want to change the industry. We want customers to be happier, more satisfied, come back, be reoccurring customers. So we're going to implement even better standards for our own ETHA products. And so is that kind of understanding that we incorporated and try to really get across into some of these regulations is that, yes, regulations are the bare minimum and it's good for some of the safety, but you really need to then start looking at the company and how there's a lot of choices on how GMP, good manufacturing practices, can be implemented. Just because I'm following GMP guidelines doesn't mean that I'm necessarily producing, there's still companies that do better, so to speak.
So for a visual learner, can you give me an example of what would be the GMP standard and then what ETHA does to make it more than just a standard
Sure.
procedure?
So
we could do more than one.
Yeah, like a really good example, and this is something I would like to see across more of like the dietary supplement industry in general. So GMP guidelines, as an example, they need dietary foods and supplements need to be manufactured in a way that does not cause contamination or adulteration or, so like you don't want your food products or Kratom to have dirt or other just microbes in it. So that makes sense. It's a very safe product. But there's no guidelines that for GMP that say we have to publish the exact alkaloid percentage on the bag. And so that's another common issue of dietary supplements in general, is that if you get a dietary supplement of ashwagandha, as an example, is that a potent version of ashwagandha? Like the active ingredient, is there enough of that active ingredient to get the effect you're looking for?
So there was this energy packet one time that I had Victor look at it, and it's supposed to be immune and hydration. And I always give it to, usually Victor's more accessible because he's like right here. So I give him the stuff that I'm looking into and like read the bag. Let me see, give me your advice. And he's like, this is not going to help you with immunity. It has like an 1/8% of what you need on a daily basis to fight the immunity. But because the label says hydration, immunity, the marketing makes you feel like you're getting it. But once you turn it around and really look at the ingredients, it's really not.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to drink like 10 of those, but then when you drink 10 of those, you're going to have so much sodium in your body, then you're just going to like freak out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because there was a published research paper I saw in general on dietary supplements. Natural compounds are effective and have really great benefits, but as a consumer, this paper found that at least around 80% of natural herbs and supplements do not contain the active ingredient, or they contain such a small amount that it doesn't give the benefit we're looking for. And
or
so, yeah, to your point, like
more, and then you don't. I was talking to a customer last week about our concentrates and stuff, and they disclosed that, from 50 milliliters, 3 doses technically, or hazelnut is 2 doses. And like, oh, well, I'm glad you told me that, because a lot of people don't know how to read the labels, and then somebody might have just taken the whole thing without even knowing. And I was like, yeah, so that's why we want to make sure that we disclose that, because you just see a little drink and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna take it, but that little drink packs a punch.
Yes.
So make sure you read the label and make sure, and there's little dashes on the side to kind of guide you. But it could also be the opposite, where like they just see a can or a drink and they just take it all when they were supposed to not. And the labeling can be kind of confusing.
Correct.
So what does ETHA do that's different or above and beyond what the guidelines are for the GMP?
Well, so labeling every bag with the exact mitragynine 7-OH percentage.
Oh, okay.
That's we were, I think, probably the first company to start doing that, to give the consumers the information they need on how much Kratom to use. And then we go above and beyond now, even using a QR code to link to a certificate of analysis that has like 5 or 6 other alkaloids listed to kind of start providing that information. So it's kind of that direction of, it's not just the minimum standard of doing something to a GMP guideline. We're going to always keep pushing that boundary of giving more information, more transparency, better product quality than others need to.
So all the bags are going to have the label of the metragenine and 7-OH, and then this gives you the different levels of what's in there, so then you can better determine what your body agrees with more. For example, me, if I have a really high MIT, I get more anxious and more like jittery. If I have very low MIT, then I get really sleepy. So I'm like Goldilocks, right in the middle. Midday gold is my favorite. It's just enough energy and just enough focus and a mood booster for me that I can go about my day and not feel really drained. And I can just have focus and finish what I have to do for the day. That's like my everyday. But, okay, well, that's cool. Then you guys started implementing or helping them.
So on the American Kratom Association, on their guidelines. Yeah, I mean, they're really trying to help companies just kind of implement regulations and get better with it. So they're kind of being I'll call it like a dual role organization. They're a consumer nonprofit advocacy group, but then they're also trying to be kind of a Kratom industry council, just helping companies be safe with their manufacturing or kind of like guide them towards that direction of how do we self-regulate as an industry. And so they've done a really good job balancing that and really kind of just promoting the science, the education, bringing a lot of these advocates together as much as possible.
So obviously you became a consumer and created ETHA, helped the American Kratom Association kind of with figuring out the GMP process. From that then, how did you start being more like hands-on as an advocate, going to the summits and going to all that stuff that they do externally outside of their everyday stuff?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was just always being involved. Say when the AKA would send out a notice of, oh, we have a potential ban that came up in this city. Can you please write to the officials or the legislators to tell them your personal story? So first it kind of just started out, I've always just diligent about doing those activities, just being as an advocate. Hey, let me show you tell me, I was very open about telling my story. And I think part of that too was that we found that some people or advocates were maybe a little bit hesitant just because of, the idea of, well, is Kratom legal? Is it not legal? Like, am I going to get in trouble for this? And I was very okay with no, this is 100% legal. It's okay. First Amendment's freedom of speech. I can always tell my story. I can't recommend other people, so I can't tell that's going to work for them. But I can always be confident about, hey, this is what's working for me. This is what I'm doing. So I'm going to be more confident in that side. So I think part of that we found early on too was just being willing to be open and honest about what we do and not worrying about any kind of backlash or issues. I didn't have that concern. So I was more willing to always go out there and just be kind of like give public testimony. And sometimes it came up where I know San Diego City was one of the cities or municipalities that bought into the 2016 misinformation from that emergency scheduling ban. And so what was complicated was that San Diego is also having a lot of issues with bath salts, synthetic marijuana spice. If you remember at that time.
I remember went to an event and that was the talk, that spice. I was like, what's spice?
Yeah, and that stuff is very horrible, and it was causing huge issues, and people were dying from it. There were some very big concerns, and unfortunately, Kratom was sold in those same retail shops that sold those products. And so in 2016, San Diego did, again, an emergency provision where they called it a synthetic analog act. So a synthetic compound that mimics other compounds, which is why, synthetic marijuana was part of that. And so they lumped in all of these compounds saying all of these, bath salts, synthetic marijuana. And unfortunately, Kratom got lumped into that emergency scheduling. And I use the term emergency was because the city did not do a public hearing. They just did it kind of behind closed doors because it was such a concern, which, I mean, with bath salts, I understand it was a concern for that. But unfortunately, when you have emergency actions, missteps can happen. And that's where Kratom got lumped into it. So that happened in 2016. Now, because San Diego City had a ban on Kratom early on, at some point early on, or maybe a year after, fairly close, San Diego County tried to do a ban on Kratom, but because it was going through their normal process, we at least had, I think, 3 days notice to like go to the hearing and give public testimony. And just because, it happened to be that San Diego County was early on in some of these, misinformation steps of trying to ban Kratom. The American Kratom Association came out to San Diego. We had some of our customer base also join us. I know
some owners too.
Yeah, Linda Klein from the time Bumblebee Botanicals, now that Kratom store or that Kratom shop.
Kava store.
Kratom Kava shop. She came out, got a lot of her customers to come give their testimony. So we at least as a Kratom industry and community, we at least had some notice of like, hey, this is going to happen. Okay, well, let's go out and tell our story.
And I think 3 minutes or less.
Yeah, and that was the thing, but it's intimidating going to some of these city councils where there's a big bench of all of the representative or the council, leadership, depending on what they're called. I think this was the council, the San Diego County Council. They're up on a podium very high up. It's a very official kind of courtroom style setting. Yeah. And then you have to give your public testimony with cameras. And so I understand it's very intimidating. It's not done in a very easy way. But fortunately,
you guys did a really good job, by the way.
Oh yeah, everyone did. Yeah, it was amazing. People giving their story. So yeah, I think we had 170 people come out give their story about how Kratom was a positive impact, and we had 0 people show up saying that Kratom was negative. Yeah. And it's just that kind of, that's kind of over and over what we see.
Sometimes we forget how much how much of an impact we can make if we come together to then advocate for whatever we're believing in. Sometimes we doubt ourselves because we get really nervous and really scared. Yeah. But having the 3 days to prepare kind of makes it a little bit better. Now, if it is like the day of, like there was one where you did have to leave. I forget the location, Huntington Beach.
I think so. Yeah, and so I try to.
I always confuse those beaches up there, but it was one of them, and you had to you just left that day and you went over there and told your story.
That's the unfortunate part is that it seems to be that these municipalities are trying to kind of get it through almost as fast as possible with very little notice, which is and that's
follow the procedure, but then not given.
And unfortunately, I think that's because the FDA, they do not have the science-backed research to back up their claims that Kratom is dangerous, and so they're trying to go to smaller cities, smaller councils that also maybe don't have the the desire to really dig deep into it. They just kind of, it looks like it should be banned. Okay, let's just ban it. So they're trying to push that through, unfortunately. But that's where, anytime we hear about any ban coming up, we either I send in kind of my personal testimony, just how it's helped me, what it's done, or if it's local, go out to it.
I think the American Kratom Association already kind of draws up a letter for you. You just have to insert your story.
It depends. Yeah. So they do a pretty good job. At least you enter in your zip code address and it will pull up your representatives. And then they give you a nice little spot to put in your personal story. So there's kind of local municipalities that have come up that I've gone out to. There is a federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act that I've done everything from scheduled meetings with our local House representatives and senators here in California just to have a one-on-one meeting with them and educate them that there is a federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act. Here is what the act is. It just wants the FDA to publish their research. It wants to create a public online forum and website to get people to share their honest and true stories, whether it's good or bad. Let's just get everyone to share their stories. Let's just be open and honest with what Kratom is. There are, like anything, there are ways to be cautious with what we're consuming. So even water can be overconsumed. So Kratom, yes, it is an amazing miracle for me, for probably a lot of other people, but there are kind of general guidelines of how to use it safely. And that's what we want to provide.
It's water can be dangerous. You can drown from it just drinking it. It's how much are you really drinking? Yeah. Are you just drinking a regular water bottle, or are you drinking gallons and gallons and gallons of them?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. So then I also got to go to a congressional briefing in Washington, D.C. So the American Kratom Association, they organized what they call a congressional briefing. So because of this federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act, they brought scientists from like Dr. Volkov from NIDA, National Institute of Drug and Abuse, Jack Henningfield, some of the same, Kirsten Smith. They basically came to give a presentation on this is the current state of the science. This is what we know, what we don't know, where we see a lot of positive areas, where we see some of the concern. So just around educating the legislation aides and kind of representatives because of that bill. How do you get that information into, you know, their bubble of awareness, so to speak.
And the cool thing is I think that's where you met Madeline Sklar, which is a regular Kratom consumer. I think she was there. To meet you,
I think she was there, but we didn't quite. Yeah, yes. I think yes. And so that's the cool thing too, is that going to the events. It's not just for like owners or anything like that. It's open to everybody, and she does such a good job advocating for like the common Kratom consumer with her TikTok, with her social media, her YouTube, her own private pages that she has. I believe she also, her and her team of women that are doing all this advocacy also were acknowledged for the Hall of Fame and the American Kratom Association as well. I think it's really great that sometimes most of these events, I think, are open to the public and it's not just closed off to. Well, I mean, yeah, and like I think that was part of the inspiring. I was so fortunate to be able to be a part of this industry and go through this process because, without this, I never would have been reaching out to my representatives as much as I do. I mean, calling them on the phone, scheduling meetings with senators and House of Representatives, legislators. And so that was fascinating. I mean, going to Washington, D.C. and just actually walking around the Capitol building and walking into the offices of our representatives and saying, oh, are they in? Can I meet with them right now? I'd like to teach them about Kratom and why it's been impactful in my life. And some people are not there, they're traveling, but our representatives are there. Their door is actually open. You can go just meet with them. I mean, it's so fascinating that is the process. And so that's also translated into just my political views in general. Like, I mean, there's so much animosity between our, like, these political fights of people just saying like red team versus blue team. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you actually believe in? Like, what do you not really like? I'm happy to talk about all of this. And it's like, okay, well, have you talked to your representative? Have you called them? Like, so people just want to get so angry and complain and go down this path. It's, well, we're a part of it. Like, you can go that's why I said, become a part of our government and actually make these changes. Like, please do that. Go talk to people about this.
So my next question was actually, when did you feel like this advocacy part of this whole industry for yourself seemed like it was making a difference? And it sounds like when you went to Washington, D.C., you felt like this was making a difference, or do you have another experience where you're like, I would say what we're doing is making a difference?
I think it goes up and down. So, I mean, even early on in 2016, the DEA rescinded their intent to schedule because so many Kratom advocates reached out and overwhelmingly showed some of the positive benefits of Kratom that, you know, for the first time ever, the DEA rescinded their intent to schedule. I mean, this is huge. Like, it's not happened any other time out of like the maybe 130 sometimes the DEA has given some of these notices. So there's definitely wins along the way. Or, you know, with San Diego County, the legislators decided to not put a ban in place, but instead look at the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. So there's definitely wins along the way that feels like, yeah, we're really making a difference. And it's huge news. But then sometimes it's when we hear about, oh, there's a ban coming up again in this potential area. It's like, what? Like, why are we going through the same thing over and over? And so in some ways, it feels like it's like Groundhog's Day in some of those areas that we have to, I mean, in all advocates, we have to kind of keep fighting. And I'm part of some Facebook groups that are really great about keeping their ear to the ground, making sure that they hear about any of these, and then also providing the science, providing their stories to other representatives and other people in the community. And that's a general sense too that I get from them, is that sometimes it's like, oh my God, amazing. We stopped this ban and now they're considering regulation, and now the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is being passed in these areas. It feels great. And then other times it feels like a letdown, because it's like, oh, now we're going to this other place and they're just perpetuating this misinformation again. It just seems like, what? Like, I thought we kind of got past that. Yeah. So, and we're definitely making a difference because Kratom is still legal. It's still around. The Kratom Consumer Protection Act has been passed in 13 states now, and there's more along the way. Mm-hmm. But there's also bans that pop up, or potential bans. I think North Dakota was one recently, just last month, that was going to be like, they proposed a ban, but now they're looking at the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. Mm-hmm. I think, I mean, I did just come back from a continuing education class at Tulane University, so Tulane Medical School. And so this was like a 4-hour course around essentially the origins of Kratom, how it's being used, and any potential recommendations doctors can give to their patients.
With updated information?
Yes. So medical professionals need to go through what's called continuing education, because as you can imagine, it's evolving so fast. I mean, it's so hard. I mean, I can't imagine being a doctor or a nurse or anyone in the medical profession just trying to keep up. You go to school for so long, and then as soon as you graduate, the information starts changing. And so you got to continually keep up with it. But fortunately, it's not like when we first started this years and years ago. I mean, doctors really had no idea what Kratom is. No. But now they're starting to hear about it. And so now there's some classes that they can learn about, okay, yeah, like Kratom does work for people. And here's kind of the average, like people use anywhere from 1 to 5 grams. Like, okay, yes, this could be a concern for addiction, especially if it's some of these like 7-OH products. Mm-hmm. But talk with your patient about it.
Do they work with the American Kratom Association, or how do they get this information?
This is actually the Global Kratom Coalition.
Oh, okay.
They were helpful and instrumental in organizing this and putting this on with Tulane University. So, I mean, it's great that this is happening.
Yeah.
But I think like anything, back to your point, like, are we making a difference, that side of it? I also learned that there's a lot of teaching doctors or universities that still believe doctors are not writing enough prescriptions. And it's like, what? Like, okay, we need to be doing exercise, nutrition. So our medical industry it still needs a lot of change coming back to helping people be healthy, helping people take responsibility, exercise, nutrition, mental health as part of that physical health. Like, so yeah, there's some really good direction, but we still need to keep educating, providing our stories, being a little more helpful on what's happening. I think
that's a topic that's going to be coming up a lot, because maybe just because I'm trying to change my habits myself, but on a lot of my social, I keep seeing things as like, what we're doing on the Western side is not really working that well. So what can we do more to like naturally enhance our overall health? So they're starting to look into like herbs, diet, movement, nutrition. Like, let's go back to the basics instead of kind of like trying to mask what we're trying not to deal with. I was like, interesting. Mm-hmm. So then what makes you stay motivated for you to keep advocating and keep going? Because you have sometimes these setbacks. I mean, that's always.
I mean, the biggest I think is just because Kratom has made such a big impact in my life for the positive that's the only reason that I've never been this passionate about anything else, about reaching out to legislators, representatives, just because Kratom has been very impactful in my life. Plus, for my parents, it's really helped them. I've had other friends and family members that have tried Kratom for kind of other like acute pain issues, and it's been helpful. So I think it's that motivation plus just the overall. I mean, for me, there's an underlying motivation of just wanting to provide, like, I'll call it just like more evidence-based facts, or kind of, what should be right. Yeah, it's just kind of like, I mean, there's a lot of potential for natural solutions, and that's part of our, we talk about all the time as far as exercise, nutrition, health, kind of how do we be healthy? And that's just more of the core fundamental, and it's just the core fundamental kind of data or knowledge of like, this is what we should be doing, not trying to promote something that just make a bunch of money as a society. So like, I want to see that overall benefit shift, away from, like, I mean, profits are great for a business continuing to grow and scale, and it needs to be part of it, but it should only be part of the mission. There's so much just where it seems companies are willing to make money at all costs, no matter what, like no matter what the negative impact on society is. It's like, oh, well, they made a bunch of money. It's like, well, yeah, like we need a more shift towards profits enabling the mission of a company. So I want to see more companies take on missions that are more than just improving their shareholder value.
And that's a big factor as to why we went from a cell phone accessory business to then something like this, because I mean, that's more like kind of chasing the dollar, but we didn't feel fulfilled. So then I'm really grateful that you guys made the decision, because now I come into work saying, hey, we're actually making a difference. It's not just a sale. I mean, of course, it's a business. We need to make some kind of profit, but we're actually helping people. Yeah,
and I think, like, to your point of what helps us continue or helps me continue, I mean, definitely reading, like, in some of the more depressing days, whether, you know, it's something where an ad account gets shut down or something happens where it shouldn't happen. On those kind of like really frustrating days, being able to read the customer comments about how much we are helping people, that has been a big motivator of helping Victor others.
Would dive so deep into the credit card processing. He wouldn't, I mean, you both did, but he took the grunt of it, and it would impact him so much emotionally, because you do all of this work, we're doing everything correctly.
Yeah,
and
it's fully proper, fully legal, but they don't
ethically.
100%.
And it's like, we're just trying to help. That's literally what it is. There's two more questions really quick before we wrap this up, because of course we went over time. But how did you hear that you were on the Hall of Fame, or how did that make you feel? And you were like, oh, okay, thank you, or like how did that
I mean, I guess definitely honored and like super appreciated that recognized for that.
Yes.
I guess I have a weird relationship, I guess, with receiving awards in general, I would say, because I'm always feeling like, oh, well, I can do better, or like, or this is not like, it's like, well, I made these mistakes over here. So yeah, that's where, and that kind of, I don't know, that negativity is definitely part of my personality in general, where I can always like do something better, do this side, and it comes across in a lot of strange ways. So it's something I try to work on, where I want to celebrate more of those individual like wins and successes, because it's constant kind of trying to stay aware of that. But so I mean, definitely honored and appreciative, because I mean, and I know there's a lot of other people that work really hard, spend a bunch of time.
Is this their first Hall of Fame ceremony or acknowledgement,
or in general, or
for the American Kratom Association?
Oh, for the American Kratom, yes.
This is the first round. Okay.
Well, so they did their Legacy Hall of Fame. So they recognized like Sebastian Guthrie, Susan Ash, a lot of other vendors that were early on into Kratom, kind of supporting their association, that were pivotal in that side. So they did a Legacy Hall of Fame, and I think now they're doing it every 6 months. They're coming out with, now they're just their normal Hall of Fame, where they're going to recognize.
Speaking of Sebastian, I think that was mine. I mean, I'm not as big as an advocate as you are, so involved. But that, when we went to the summit in San Diego, is when I realized, wow, we are really making a difference. Yeah. This is really cool. The American Kratom Association does a good job of educating not only consumers, but the vendors as well. And then it also showed me that how much knowledge you guys have given me, because in the trial, sitting in the trial, made me realize a lot of people, even professionals, don't know
it is shocking how,
and I'm like, how can
there's a lot of information to know, and it is very shocking how I guess that's probably part of the other driving motivation too, is just like I said, kind of like that data, that knowledge, is how do we just educate and kind of like, this is what is really out there, so let's just kind of promote the actual information.
One of the big reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is to get that information. You guys spend so much time and efforts into learning. It's like, why can't we share that knowledge with the world? One last question, I promise that's the last one. Now that you've done all this advocacy, been acknowledged for all your work, where do you think the industry will go from here? Do you think it'll keep evolving? Do you think it's going to be stuck where it is right now? Or is that too complex of a question to know?
I mean, it's, in some ways, it's continuing the current battles that are going on. So even though the FDA, even though the DEA rescinded their intent to schedule, the FDA tried to kind of do backdoor channels to still get it improperly banned. They are being forced now to do their research. So like the single ascending dose study was a great, study outcome where, there's people even up to 12 grams. It was well tolerated at all doses. So I think it's paving the way. There's a lot more human research, like human clinical trials that are being conducted and completing. But there's still concerns because there's still this, misinformation or stigma against Kratom because it is a natural product. I mean, yes, there are some concerns of don't overconsume. It could be habit forming, but it's like we want to be open with it, not just fear-based, over exaggerating these issues. I always tell
customers, if you are a little hesitant or a little scared, or if you have a family member that is a little hesitant, one, listen to a podcast because we pretty much answer everything on here. And then two, just make the effort to learn a little bit more. And it doesn't have to be about Kratom, just in general, like a new supplement you want to take.
Yeah, I mean,
because fear is usually fed with not knowing what's in there or you're consuming or whatever. So just put a little bit of effort to figure out what you're really putting in your body or what you're gonna do, and then your fear will.
And it's not. I mean, it's not only Kratom. I mean, there's a lot of products out there, a lot of foods or processed foods that. I mean, I like sugars and candies, but then I also have to kind of restrict those and be like conscious of like, oh, okay, well, I'm feeling really anxious after I've been eating a lot of these sugars and stuff. Okay, maybe I should really cut back and try something different. So like be more personal and responsible for how I feel and what I'm doing day to day. That's another important aspect with Kratom and everything.
Now that I'm looking into what I'm eating more, I just learned that cherry tomatoes spike your sugar levels a lot. And I didn't realize that. And I was like, And you would think because it's a vegetable and you add it on salads or something, just the very common knowledge that we know. It
was also nice because Chris McCurdy gave a presentation and it was there for question and answering through Zoom. But it was nice that he actually mentioned the glucose stability. So consuming Kratom actually helps people stabilize their blood sugar levels because it inhibits... It inhibits the body from breaking down complex carbohydrates and absorbing glucose in the intestines. And so, it's amazing that, as for all the benefits that we talk about Kratom with, for like my chronic pain, mental health issues, there's a big part of helping with glucose levels that is not getting much awareness yet.
We're gonna have to do a topic on that problem because Nicole's giving me the side eye right now to wrap it up. But I think that would be a good topic for later.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about that again.
Okay, well, I think that's a good little background of your history, our history as a company, and how we've started and how we're really big on the advocacy. We 100% support American Kratom Association, the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. I always mess that one up. And any effort that will help, just kind of help people learn more about Kratom so that they can be well informed, so that then they can make the decision whether or not they think that Kratom is beneficial for them or not.
Yep.
So,
cool.
Thank you for answering all those questions. I know we got a little sidetracked, but...
Yeah, thank you for tuning in and learning about the American Kratom Association Hall of Fame and all the great work that they do. If you found value in today's episode or enjoyed listening to it, we'd be really grateful if you supported us by shopping at ethanaturals.com for all of your botanical needs. Don't forget to follow our podcast page and stay updated on new episodes at ETHA Live Fully Podcast. Your support would really, really mean a lot to us. Today's topic was brought to us by you guys.
A lot of customers have been asking about it because Madeline has been talking about it with the girls, and then it's like, Alex too. So you're actually more popular than you think. Excellent. No pressure for information that you're giving out. So
I'm happy that people find this informative and happy to answer all sorts of questions and help as much as I can for absolutely. And if I need to come out and visit, that's the other part too. I love visiting other cities, places, educating anyone, whether it's traveling to DC, California. I was able to go out to the European Union to help kind of educate. So I just love kind of promoting that information.
Even if you go to other podcasts, I have a couple podcasts for you to actually guest appear in a few months. So if you're interested in having Alexander on your podcast to kind of help your demographic learn a little bit more about Kratom, the industry, and all that stuff,
absolutely,
that would reach out to the email support@ethanaturals.com, and then they'll direct you to me, and then I will then reach out to you and try to work something out.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah, and then if you also have any other questions on future episodes, please submit your questions in the Q&A section down below, or you can email us, podcast@ethanaturals.com. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm Alexander.
I'm Amanda.
And I'm Nicole.
And as always, live fully.